make a mess.
I actually was telling Noble that I saw the movie last year at Sundance, and so I was quite pleased to know that I'd be moderating this session because I really enjoyed the film last year, and then watched it again on Hulu. By the way, you can watch it on Hulu. Tell your friends that it's on Hulu now. But before we get to Sundance and that whole thing, let's start off with your background, because you've got I think you said it was an eclectic, and that's a good choice of words. You have an eclectic background as a filmmaker. Maybe kind of walk us through a little bit how you got into what you do and what you do.
Can you hear me? Everyone hear me? Okay. Let's see. I'll give you the abridged version. By the way, thank you all for coming. Much appreciated. Thank you. Let's see. I was just telling you, actually, I have a very good friend from my childhood in the audience there. And we were just talking about how, playing in the backyard in school and stuff like that. And then after school one day, a friend of mine told me about a program. It was an opportunity for kids to see how the cable television, which was beginning then, cable, studios worked. So I was in my teens, and they take you to this, a facility like this, and they had switchers, and that old school kind of stuff. Anyway, from there, I kind of loved it. Star Wars came out. I made little short films. I wrote screenplays, and then I got into music a little bit. And in college, I had a music and film, music minor, film major. And then at one point, I had to make a choice, and I chose film. And from there, it was, let's see, I worked at the Department of I had an interesting job at the Department of Correction, making films there, using the inmates as actors, actually, and worked in the jail on Rikers. They gave me a gold shield. Yeah, which was pretty interesting. I was 26 at the time, so no one would listen to you unless you had a gold shield. They didn't want to give me a gold shield, but they gave it to me because no one would listen to me. Anyway, so I'd go there, and we'd have the inmates act, and the idea was to teach officers how to recognize problems brewing. And it was an interesting opportunity for me because a large majority of the kind of work that we do in film is about criminals, or can be. I'm a big fan of thrillers, although this may not seem that way. There are aspects of the filmmaking that may have you may notice a little thriller-like language and, Ed's behavior in the beginning. So what that training did was it was meant to show the officers, for instance, a person's gesture or the placement of his body vis-a-vis someone else's body. Those things, if you focused on in a way, and then edited together a piece of film that would illustrate to them how this is going to lead to someone's death, and you're not going to catch it in time. So that was fun, and also the language of the inmates, and it just taught me a lot about it, and it gave me a lot of insight into performance, strangely enough. And then from there, I went into advertising for years. I did a lot of advertising, Procter & Gamble and Coca-Cola and AT&T and stuff. And I flew all over and did that for years. I discovered music videos, or they discovered me. I don't know exactly how it happened. But did music videos for years, worked with a lot of big stars, Seal and Taylor Swift. That was much later. And over the years, it's about a good 10 years of videos. But then I realized at a certain point, my interest has always been before those other venues, if that's the word to use, showed up. My interest was always in making movies. And I'll admit, one of my favorite filmmakers was Ridley Scott, and he started doing commercials, and I saw his commercials when I was very young, younger. And I did like the idea of being a commercial director and finding my way to movies via commercials. But something happened in the process, and I did a blues documentary, and it got nominated for a Grammy, and that was interesting because, again, it became more traditional filmmaking, seeing characters evolve, and having more of an elastic time to play with and develop the characters. And then from there, I started writing, and a lot of writing. I also, in the process, met David Fincher, and then I kind of worked with him and followed him around and sat by him as he made, I met him on Benjamin Button, but they had shut it down at the time. and then Zodiac. Then they went back and did Benjamin Button, and then he asked me to do second unit on Social Network. Yeah, so then I was in Boston for that movie, and then I was doing some other stuff. He went off to do Dragon Tattoo, which I did not hang out on. But here's a fun film moment. But he asked me to be in a screening for Dragon Tattoo, which is just a group of like 5-10 people at his facility. So I go in the room, and there's David. Actually, David didn't want to be in the room, but there's Robert Towne and yeah, exactly, and Eric Roth.
Wow.
Yeah, and they're both in there, and they're like, "Hey, Noble, hey."
So Robert Towne, when I first broke in, everybody said Chinatown is like the...
Yeah, it still is.
And then, and of course, Roth wrote Forrest Gump amongst many other movies, right?
Yeah, so I'm in that kind of company in the room, trying to like just crawl into a corner and just hope they don't kick me out. That's happened a couple of times, strangely enough. But so I got this. Yeah, and I commented on the film, actually, which was pretty funny. He called me. It's like, so what'd you think? And I'm like, well, I think you should blah, blah, blah. And then I'm reading an article later, and he said, yeah, a friend of mine said, I couldn't do that. And I was like, oh, okay. He wasn't listening to me. But anyway, and, from there, there's a lot of things that happen because this is show business, and, it's just a very unpredictable circus-like atmosphere. And there are lots of films that were in development. There was one, American Psycho. I was going to do a redo of that. The actual film, I met Bret Easton Ellis, and he gave me I wrote a draft, and actually it went around town for a while. It still goes around town as a writing sample. We were pleased with that. The actual producers were going to do that. We got down to signed contracts, and then for whatever reason it didn't happen. And that was one of those moments when you go, oh, show business. I heard about this, and then. Lots of other almosts, including a couple with David to be produced. And then I wrote a little script called Tomorrow Man, and that was the whole reason why I did it, because I wanted something doable that was interesting to me, character-based, as well as I owned it, because up to that point, it was always a matter of rights. For instance, American Psycho was owned by Lionsgate at the time, who hired me, and I got into the Writers Guild from doing that. But still, they owned the rights to it, so I couldn't just go out and make the movie after having written the script. And then there's a couple other projects that I didn't own the rights to. So it suddenly, after a while, it dawns on you how the business works, and you go, oh, okay, I get it, rights, that's important. So I started writing this, and then I wrote, Tomorrow Man, and it was a matter of stars aligning after years and years of stars not being in alignment, and it sort of came together anyway. And
well, so that's probably a good takeaway for those of you who are directors out there. If you can write and direct an original material, then you're much closer potentially to getting things made, because you're creating the content yourself. The screenwriting. You didn't have any formal training in it? No. So how did you go about learning? Just by doing?
No, I just hung out with Robert Towne. Just call him up. Hey, man. Yeah, no. Like everything, I didn't have formal training in anything. I taught myself to be a cinematographer, and I shot a show for Fincher. It actually never came out, though. It was called Videosyncrasy. For HBO, and we shot the first 2 episodes, but they didn't buy the season for some reason. But it was a pretty interesting experience for me, needless to say. But yeah, I'm kind of autodidactic, kind of. You just look. When I was just saying, this is incredible what you students now have, because when I had the wise idea to become a filmmaker and go to film school, this is not the kind of environment that we had. Especially on the East Coast. I was from New York, and you just don't have studios or any of that stuff. You had an equipment room, which was a closet, and it had like 16 millimeter cameras, and they had maybe 7 of those cameras that you had to, beg, borrow, and steal to get, and then you do your little film rolls, and then edit on a flatbed and all this kind of stuff. I know I'm giving my age away, but whatever. And no studios or any of that stuff. Lighting, really, you had a Lowell. You know those Lowell kits? They're like 1K kits. They're ENG kits. You go if you ever get into news or anything like that. You carry it around with you. You open the lights up. They're meant to be plugged into the wall, and you put them up, and that's it. And we would make our movies with that kind of stuff. We didn't have anything like this. So the film school offered you that and a piece of paper that said BFA at the end of 4 years, and of course they took your money. But in that, but the good thing is that under the auspices of being a film major and being able to dedicate your energies and your whatever that may be, I mean, we went to work. And the guys that wanted to get the cameras got the cameras. The guys that got the lights figured out how to do it. You didn't have the perfect light, but you understood lighting. You bounced it. You did this. You got a sheet to, you didn't have 216 or whatever this is, grid cloth it looks like, but you didn't have this stuff. So you worked it. You figured it out. And that's what taught you. So I taught myself to shoot. Because to me at the time, I thought the most, this is funny, speaking of writing actually, I thought at the time the most important thing was how the film looked. Because people would judge you on how your movie looked. And there is some truth to that. So in film school, I'd have, this cool lighting and half-lit faces and, all this kind of stuff and some kind of dolly shot or something. And people would say, wow, he's a great filmmaker. You're a great filmmaker. The story was for crap, but, but it looked cool. But very early on, around that time, someone said to me, writing's everything. And, Coppola famously said to George Lucas, if you want to be a director, you have to learn to write. And I was like, what do you know? And my film teacher at the time said, writing is everything. And I was like, I didn't want to listen to him. Shooting was everything. But the truth is, nothing happens until you put it on paper. Nothing. And that goes for music videos, nothing happens until you write it on paper. And your ability to craft prose in some compelling way that makes someone start paying is really the job, And then, of course, you expand that to a full-length script. And if you have, a lot of guys get in by the script. They hold it hostage. And they just go, here's a great script. There are not that many of them. A lot of people write scripts, but there are not that many.
Well, let's talk about The Tomorrow Man in terms of the conception of it. What do you remember the very initial instincts or ideas? No, don't.
No. I remembered preppers are interesting, and I had known a hoarder. I had met a hoarder. And it occurred to me that the difference between them is neatness. And then I thought about that juxtapositioning of characters. And also, I don't know at what time it happened, but I did think consciously it would be interesting to show a person late in life, a retiree, essentially going through all of the narrative mechanics of a rom-com, and that's really what it was. So it became a matter of, even when he's pushing her through the supermarket, that was a classic example of that. And there's other things like that. The whole the montage in the middle of it. It's a conceit, a cliche certainly, and that was the point of it all. It's like, James Schamus, who was the producer. I don't know if you're familiar with James Schamus. Brokeback Mountain, Crouching Tiger. So when he got on board, it was a big deal, and it meant a lot to me because he's such a great screenwriter. But when we got into the throes of production, he started reading me the riot act, and he goes, and I don't care about this, I don't care about that, and I know you thought it was a good idea, but it's not, He's just letting me know, and he's not a big guy, but I certainly was fearful. Anyway, he said, and by the way, I hate montages. So I'm like, wait, what are you talking about? He's like, and walk out of the room. And I'm like, well, it's my day job because I did music videos at the time, and it was like, I think I might, be able to pull it off. So I will see, whatever. So he let me do my thing, and then after a couple of cuts or what have you, he comes back and goes, and by the way, I love the montage. I got away with it, barely, but yeah.
Were you thinking at all about an audience for this? Because there's some things that I suppose conventional wisdom in Hollywood, where you get two older leads, right? The prepper hoarder thing is maybe not the most, presumably.
Netflix has a show now.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm ahead.
But were you at all thinking audience, or were you just thinking, this is the story I want to tell, these are the characters I want to write?
No, I wasn't really thinking audience. I mean, there's a certain... I mean, look, when I write, I always think of the audience, you know? I mean, that's part of what I enjoy about movies is as a kid, from what I remember, you go to the theater in Queens and you sit there and the trailer comes on. I write trailers. I mean, I'll admit that. I write for the trailer moments, and I even make jokes when we're done with it. I'm like, trailer moment, trailer moment, trailer moment. And it's that succinct understanding of what your movie's about in really stark proportions throughout the film. You know, this is really what encapsulates what you were saying earlier. Who are you?
Who are you?
Yeah, you know, I mean, guarantee you that's in a trailer. In fact, I'm certain it's in the trailer. We were talking about Lawrence of Arabia in the room back there, but. So the demographics of it I wasn't thinking of. And the truth is that became problematic as we're getting into the production because I'm doing music videos and things for like teenagers and 20-year-olds and they're telling me, well, you know, the demographics, you know, 60 and above. I'm like, wait, no. What are you talking about? I do, you know, hip, cool stuff for young people. I'm like, no, that's not what this is. And, you know, I began trying to find the visual style and the aesthetic style of it that worked for me, but also worked for what was, you know, the intended audience. And, you know, there were moments where we were not on the same page because I never saw it as being, and I think I may have to bend to it at some point, but I really don't think about audiences. I don't think I'm that unique in that, you know, if I find it compelling and interesting, I think there's going to be somebody out there that does too. And again, you know, movies are for a price. So the price point of what we were talking about, particularly with someone like Lithgow and Blythe Danner, is like this is a $1 million movie, so it's not a lot of money, and as far as movies go, so that was part of it. I was like, look, let's just have a little fun, a little bit, not only in the making of the film. I said, look, I'm not sure what it is, the tone of it, and you know, before we got to Bleecker Street, there are a few people that were. Well, actually, Bleecker bought it, but before Symbolic Exchange picked it up, we had discussions with other Focus Features and other people that were like, the ending. Well, now that you've all seen the ending, they're like, well, it was really interesting, but the ending, and you know, I was like, well, that's the movie. And when we spoke to Seamus, he said, you don't have to pitch it, you don't have to, you know, you don't have to sell us at all. Just tell us what the expressions are of Blythe and John at the end of the movie. And I said, they put their glasses on, they're smiling. And he goes, okay, sold. And I said, and he said, what was everyone else doing? I said, they're all horrified. And he goes, oh, okay, I get it. So, but beyond that, yeah, I did not think about the audience at all. I just said, this is the movie I want to make. And what part of what excited me about the process was not knowing what it was. Like I said, there are moments in the beginning, and there's more on the cutting room floor, but there was a whole stalker thing up front, you know, where, I mean, there's aspects of it where it seems like he's stalking her. And I always felt a little dark humor here, but you know, you lived your life, you probably met a lot of men. At this point, it's like, as long as you don't end up in pieces in his trunk, you know? But beyond that, I'm almost willing to deal with anything. Oh my God, he's gonna cut me up and put me in his trunk, you know? So I wanted to play with those expectations because in my mind, it was also art meeting, you know, art and commerce, I guess, or life imitating art. But at a good example, my niece, instantly because of Lithgow's reputation with Dexter, that's all she thought about. Was Dexter. But there are other people that were thinking about See You in My Dreams, which was Blythe's film she did with Bleecker a year earlier, which did very well. And that was right over home plate, you know, romantic, late life romantic movie. So there were a lot of people that were expecting Dexter. And even in some comments and, not comments, but reviews and things, a lot of people kind of expected that. You know, they didn't know. And that was kind of, I mean, that's kind of the process, in the process of making the movie as well as it being received. I mean, we've gotten some very good reviews, and we've gotten reviews where people go, what the hell is this, you know? So I guess this is a long way of saying, I know I never thought of the audience.
I'd like to, I teach what I call character-driven screenwriting. Like, the story all comes from character. How did Ed evolve? You said you had this idea of like retiree, you had this idea of prepper. So can you maybe retrace some of the processes or the way in which he evolved as a character?
Yeah, well, the prepper issue is really, that's not much more than, I mean, I don't want to call it boilerplate because that's not what it is. But what it does is it represents an attitude that can be applied to almost anything. It's just very specific and it's visual, you know, at least the way in which I wanted to do it. But it was more, the movie's really about a man dealing with change. Mm-hmm. And that's really what the whole movie is about, is the rapid change that a man is learning to confront at this point in his life where he thought he'd never have to, you know, you set in your ways, so to speak. So he's not a mean man or he's certainly certain about many things. But I wanted to show a person dealing with change. And that was really it. So I gave him a place to start where he was somewhat conservative, you know, but he even uses language like progressive and things like that. And he's just trying to grapple with the world as it is because it just seems like it's very strange to him. And it was difficult finding the right things for him to see and respond to. But I wanted him to be insistent, and I wanted him to be annoying, you know, but I also wanted him to have a certain charm to him because ultimately the earnestness is what people learn to appreciate, especially when he applies it to the love, this new love that he's found. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I wish I could say that my process is, at least in this case, I mean, sometimes I struggle, you know, with the character trying to figure out what their quirks are, and sometimes it's brutal. This one came quick. It really did. It just tumbled out. And
both he and Ronnie too?
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing that's interesting about the Ronnie character. I did not see Blythe at all in the role. I won't say who I saw, but it wasn't Blythe. And I'm thrilled that we got her because my thoughts were a bit too on the nose, actually. It was, and I'm glad she's unexpected. And, you know, being the hoarder, you know, as a character. But she was she was a little bit more difficult than Ed. But again, it became what these two characters, the way I saw it is like these two characters are essentially using material. They're materialists. They're kind of, and it's a way of kind of releasing their dependency on material because they found something spiritual between the two of them. And the irony is that usually in a movie like this, you know, the woman would come in and change his life for the better and say, "Follow me off into the sunset, and I've transformed you." But he only becomes aware of this because of meeting her, and then he has to help her, you know, because she doesn't want to change. And I kind of knew that because the hoarding thing is an interesting thing. I've heard and read actually that it's very similar to alcoholism, where, you know, when you confront someone who's an alcoholic and you say, you know, you have a problem. It's like, what's the matter? I had a drink, you know, and then to get them to understand how many drinks they've had and how disruptive their behavior is a more difficult thing to do. But so I knew at that moment when he decided to sell everything and tell her, it's over, love you, but that's not happening, you know. And I knew that would be the moment that they kind of broke, and then see if she, you know, found her way back.
They both, in a way, they're like two sides of the same coin in that they're both trying to control, right?
Yeah,
trying to
absolutely.
control their, you know, he's got his very insular life, very organized. He's got his message boards. He's got the news that he watches, the way he makes his sandwiches, the way he's got this little, and she does too. And so in a way, it's like, as you said, they discover something. They kind of allow themselves to lose a bit of control in discovering each other. Is that fair to say? Yeah,
right. And he's interesting because, and again, both of them, for different reasons, cling to material for salvation. So he thinks all the things that he's gathered is going to save him. And that's what he keeps talking about. He's going to survive. You know, everyone's, oh, the world's going to end. And actually, when we were selling the movie or talking about, so actually in trying to figure out exactly how big the explosion was, that was the problem. How big is this explosion? Because if it's really big, they're dead. But they're not. Are they dead? Does the world, did anybody think that the world ended? Okay, thank you. I was like, I mean, you were one of the first, and thank you, you're all young and smart. So, but a lot of people thought that, oh, well, the world's ended. It's like, no, the world, it's like, hey, you've all seen post-apocalyptic movies. I mean, the world didn't end, you know, they go on, zombies or what have you. But the point is that the world didn't end. But we struggled to dial in exactly, you know, how big that explosion was.
Interesting.
Yeah, but that's the idea, is that he's planning on surviving, you know, and she too clings to material in more of an emotional scattershot kind of way. That struggle with that little jar thing is she doesn't know, and she's struggling. She doesn't want it. It's like a drink. She doesn't want to take it, but she's forced to. But she does it because she's trying to. I mean, the obvious is she's trying to fill a hole with the daughter and family, but I don't know. And gosh, who was it? I think it's Sidney Lumet talked about doing, I think it's Sidney Lumet, or it might have been Ridley Scott, one of these big famous directors, but he spoke about the evil killer or serial killer, what have you, but you have to show the rubber ducky in his past, meaning that everyone wants to know why you're doing this, and then we cut to the scene where someone took his rubber ducky away, and now I know he's a serial killer. It's like, don't put that in the movie. You don't need to know, you know. So I actually went further and spoke about the husband and the daughter, but the idea that somehow there's some logic at play that makes her do that and manifests itself into her buying stuff is all about, he's more about control, she's about comfort. But either way, it's that as long as I'm here, I'm calm. I know somehow that I'm at ease as a result of the things that I've purchased and put around me.
Let's talk about this. One of the subplots that I love so much is the relationship she has with, I guess her name is the work she works with, that younger woman that she works with.
Yeah.
I love that little subplot because it's like, you don't expect the mentor character, it's like a reversal. You expect mentor characters to be older. In this case, really the mentor character is kind of younger for her.
Right.
So can you maybe talk a bit about that little?
Yeah, I didn't name Eve Harlow, and I did not, did anybody think that she owned the place? The place that they work? No? Good, okay. Some people thought that she owned it. Honestly, I don't know who owns it, but she, yeah, I mean, that was it. Again, it's like, look, the good news or the bad news is that there's a lot of movies, man. I'm assuming you're all or most of you have Netflix. That's a frightening place, you know, to get lost in Netflix. And you're just going, oh my God, how many movies have been made? And this is just Netflix. And, but with that comes an enormous amount of material for templates. You know, all rom-coms work a certain way. Thrillers work a certain way. I mean, I'm sure you all know who Sid Mead is. Yes, everyone? Sid Mead? Yeah. Okay, so, and he's not incorrect either. I mean, it's like the blues, whereas there's only 3 chords, but you can do a lot with 3 chords. But because of that, the reason why I'm saying this is because the relationship between the mentor and the woman, you know, you go, okay, well, this is a standard thing I have to do. Let me flip it, you know. So then it becomes, and again, that was the kind of joke of the whole movie, is to watch these people above their 60s act like teenagers. That was really it.
Yeah, the walk of shame, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's like that's the whole point of how many opportunities do I have? And I hate to, you know, I don't want to sound, you know, cynical or anything about it, but it became a bit of that. It's like that is really the concept of it. I'll use that term because it sounds highfalutin, as opposed to the old Hollywood term would be gag, you know. But that's really it. Is how many opportunities can I show what you would normally see in Bridget Jones' Diary, but put 60-year-olds in it, and it has, you know, the sex scene or the would-be sex scene. And that was written differently, by the way.
Yeah. How so? What?
Well,
Okay, so a little bit of mystery there then.
Yeah, Blythe was helpful.
Let's talk about, I mean, how did they come on board? What was that process like of getting John Lithgow and Blythe Danner, these incredible actors?
Yeah, look, I mean, I wish I would say that I've written it for him, and I still don't write for actors, and I get in a lot of trouble for that. And I know that's probably one of the, being, as I said, autodidactic, that's one of the things I really need to teach myself is who's going to be in your movie? That's the first question they ask you, who? And it's one of my failings. But I wrote the character of John, and it just so happened he was coming. I was just finishing the screenplay, and it was going around our company. I'm at Anonymous Content. You've probably seen some shows or something. What's that show about the hacker guy, the guy that played in Mr. Robot, right? So yeah, we do Mr. Robot and things like that. And yeah, so it was going around, and people go, "Oh, this is really great." And John had just come over for management there, and there's always a honeymoon period.
Right.
I'm going through one right now with my agents where they just send you stuff and they pay attention to you, and you know eventually they're going to ignore you. But in the beginning, they just, "Oh yeah, we love you. Here, take this. Look at this. Oh, this is great." And they put my screenplay under John's nose because he was fresh to the company and I had fresh finished it, and there was a little bit of energy around it. 6 months later, probably would have not happened, but it happened at the right. Like I said, you hang around the game long enough, and the stars finally find their way over to you and go, "Oh yeah, we should probably line up for this guy." So that's what happened. He read it. He came on board immediately. Here's the thing. So he goes, "Yes, I want to do it, but I'm doing The Crown, so I can't do it until next year. So if you'll wait for me, I'd be happy to do it." And I thought of not waiting for him. Trust me when I tell you, because I was anxious to get him. But I'm glad I did, and of course I did. And then he won the Emmy on our shoot. So he left on a Friday to fly back to Hollywood to win the Emmy, and then come back on Monday. And I said, "You better come back, by the way. If you win, you better come back." And I kind of knew he was going to win, but yeah, so we were very fortunate, an Emmy Award. He's won so many awards, and he's been around forever. Here's the interesting thing, though. On set, we kept I'm the shooter, I'm the DP as well. So, I'd call him and "John, let's go." I'd call John, he had to come back to set, and he's like, "Noble, I've never really been a star in my film, so this is a lot of activity." I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry." But yeah, he was not used to, and in retrospect, I realized that. It's like, yeah, he's always this great character actor or something, but he's not the star of the movie. And I think that had a lot to, I think maybe that had something to do other than the incredible screenplay that I wrote. That was,
Hotel New Hampshire,
Yeah.
of Endearment, Yeah. What about Blythe then? She came on after?
Yeah, and she was doing press in the neighborhood. She was down at the Ivy doing press on See You in My Dreams. And we met for coffee, and she said, "Yes, I want to be in the movie if you'll have me." It was a very short conversation.
And they'd never worked together before?
Yeah, so that's interesting. And there's a I'll give you the clean version of it, but I know these guys are really kind of, John and Blythe are saucy. But John was up for a play early in his career, and Blythe he was going to play opposite Blythe. And it was very early in his career, and he had been given an opportunity to do a movie at the time too, and he kind of weighed the two, and the play was really good, but he ended up doing the movie, which wasn't, I think, is the way he puts it. And had he had done that, he would have met Blythe. But they became friends. They know each other. They've hung out many times in parties. But this movie's the only, so far, the first time they've ever been on screen together. So that was.
It's probably like 4 decades, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, they're both, certainly accomplished and well known. And so that was a certain notoriety in that as well. Yeah.
The movie's beautiful to look at.
Thank you.
And so you shot it as well, right?
Yes, I did.
So maybe talk to us about, I think you said you used David Fincher's camera, right?
Yeah, anybody see Fincher's name in the credits there? Yeah. He gave me his camera to shoot the movie with, which was nice. "Don't screw it up. Here's my camera." But you can break the camera. He loves that stuff. Just break it. I shot with that, and It was a 27, 28. I cheated. It's probably 28-day schedule. Being the DP and the director, you can go out and shoot all those pastoral shots and shots of nature and little things. Even the car drive-bys, you know, I would just go out and shoot. I'd drag an AC or something with me, but.
So you did B-roll yourself?
What's that?
B-roll for yourself. B-roll.
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing. It's like there are certain directors. Fincher's one of them. Ridley Scott's another, and me. You know, how's that for company? But I'm not. You know, they're not alone. But yeah, you do your own B-roll. I remember, and I knew this when I was much younger, and I understood, and I didn't even understand B-unit directors and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that was why it was such a big deal for me to do The Social Network. And he showed up a couple of days, you know. So, yeah, there are certain. Does everybody know what B unit is?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you know, you'll have plane landings and car pull-ups to the sidewalk and eggs being flipped in a pan and a cigarette being put out. That's all B unit stuff. So a guy has a list and he goes out and he shoots all this stuff. But then you have certain directors like Ridley Scott who shoots all of their inserts. And this is why that shot of the cigarette going into the ashtray looks awesome. You know? And he's a commercial guy. So, and the first time I really saw this was a little movie he did with Tom Berenger called Someone to Watch Over Me.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that movie?
Yep.
Yeah, and there's this moment where he puts down a glass, and it's just a cutaway of the glass going, I'm like, look at this, you know, and yeah, he does all that. So, and I believe that stuff's important. It's a lot of fun, too. So, yeah, I mean, it's this, you know, on a quilt, it's that little stitch and little thing there that just, you know, gives you the whole impression.
I think we got some time for some questions. If you want to go back to the microphone back there, if you have some questions for Noble. The ending, did you always have that in mind?
No.
Ned did not have that in mind. When did that emerge?
Remember I told you about the friend of mine that said Muskrat Love?
Yeah.
I called him again. Actually, no, I didn't call him. We were talking. I told him the whole story, and at the end he goes, and then a nuclear bomb goes off, and I'm like, oh my God. That's genius. And then I rewrote the whole movie.
Wow.
Because of that ending.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
How many people were surprised by that? Yeah, okay, look at that.
Good.
Yeah. I love, because the look, you're right, the look on the faces of everybody's horrified, and you're doing that pan right to the right, and then they put the glasses on, and they do have that little smirk on their face, like they kind of anticipated it.
That was nightmarish, and I would have done it differently, but that's show business. Okay, again, you're film students, so it's technical stuff. We tried that shot twice. Each day, we always ended up schedule at the end of the day. Just, you know, we'll get there in time, and suddenly the sun's going down. We're barreling our way to the location, get the people out. Now, here's what's interesting about it. When Ed goes into his house, that's one house. When he turns around and looks out, that's another house 7 miles away. So when we're facing the house and everyone's looking out, that's one location. We had to take all of the tables, match everything on the tables perfectly, and then reset the tables at the other location, and then do the reverse, and actions and everything like that. Because the problem was, the house that we found, which was fantastic, and the reason I got that house was because that long dolly up the hallway to his chair, from the beginning of the movie, I wanted to do it all in one shot, but there were those that thought it maybe was a little bit too creepy in the beginning. I was like, that's why I came to the house, a 15-foot drive, and this guy's rambling on, you know. I'm like, you know, but okay, so maybe I'll make that in another movie. But anyway, that's why we got the house. But the problem is, and the guy that owned the house was a pack rat in a way. So he was actually he was a RISD professor. So a lot of it, like the clock, all that stuff was his. You know, and he had 5 Barker loungers in his living room. We had to remove them all, just keep the one that he had. Wow. But if you go out his front door, there was 60 feet trees, just a wall of trees. So you couldn't do the explosion there. So we had to find a field with the right lawn and kind of feeling and everything. So we found that. So it was really difficult. Anyway, so what I wanted to do was, as a wonderful, you've all seen Close Encounters, I'm assuming?
Sure.
Okay, so there's a scene where By the way, this movie is actually Close Encounters, what is one of my favorite films. He's driving a Ford, which is Roy Neary's driving a Ford, by the way. Ronnie is the name of Roy's wife in Close Encounters. And there's a scene where he's driving down the road at night, and it's supposed to be a UFO, which I did in one version, but I didn't show you. In a way, this is about a guy that's obsessed with something. And that movie had a huge effect upon me. But what was I going to?
You were going to do that, the way you were going to try and approach that shot, I think you said.
Oh, I'm sorry?
The last shot, you're talking about that you had to redo the shot or
Oh, yeah, right. So there's a scene in Close Encounters when they go back to see the spaceship come in, and it ends up being police helicopter. I mean, the helicopters, if you remember that scene. And it's classic Spielberg, you drive in on every face, and what that does for you as a director is that you can time it. How long I can hold on each face, I can pull it, I can cut to the next guy anytime I want, and I can set up the scene to float, and expand or contract as long as I need it to. Didn't have the time. Now, I'm not a big fan of Steadicams, and I did have a Steadicam in one shot that ended up not being in the movie, but I could have brought him for that day, and this is one of those things years later you'll go, but I didn't because I could have really drove in on everybody really quickly. So it was a last minute thing where I said, we got to set it, and this can be fun sometimes about this, but I said we're going to set a dolly track and I'm going to call it live. So I just dollied. We did it twice maybe before the sun went down, but we dollied, got to them. I said, Blythe, glasses, smile, that's it. And we left. And I hoped, that it worked out right. And that's what's in the movie. But that was not my intention.
Wow, you did it. Okay, we got a question back here. Can you say your name and then?
Hi, it's Matt Berdlich.
Whoop, but the mic's not on. Let's see. Can someone maybe help with that or?
Hello.
There you go. Okay. What's your name?
Hi, Matt Berdlich.
Okay.
I was just wondering what lessons you've learned in trying to seek funding for your projects.
Trying to what?
Seek funding.
Seek funding.
Lessons you've learned in trying to seek funding.
Oh, I guess it's a good question because I don't have an answer. Look, there's a lot of factors. The easiest thing is to get a big star. But I must be honest, we had the amount of money that we had and this, the star that we had, we thought it would be a slam dunk, and it wasn't. But we did in the end up with the right money and the right people and everything. But I guess, like I said, you kind of learn what elements in a screenplay are appealing to an actor. And then, Lithgow was talking about the speeches in a couple of his interviews. He's like, well, had a lot of nice speeches. And it's actor bait, they love that stuff. And it's like that, gets certain people to show up, and that's helpful, but it depends. It's like, it's a combination of things. And that's the thing that you're gonna learn is how all of these elements, it's a complex thing. It's incredibly powerful, what film is. But it's gonna be a matter of understanding how all these elements come together, and you'll develop over the years an instinct of, just like the people on the other end that are going to sign the check. They have an instinct too. And they've probably worked as hard as you on learning what it is that works. But that's really it. And it's also timing. And when I say timing, I mean where we are in a culture and, as well as the marketplace in general. So I hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
There's that classic story about Bull Durham, where Ron Shelton wrote the "I Believe" speech, but he never intended it to stay in the movie. He did it strictly to get an actor, in this case, Kevin Costner.
I didn't know that story, but it works. I love that stuff.
Other question? Here's the name and.
Good evening. Thank you very much. My name is Lawrence Kim. I'm a professor of production design. I had a question about your characters. I think John Lithgow and Blythe Danner were such a great combination, and obviously there was a lot of energy. Did you ever have an idea? I know you wrote for the audience and you didn't think about characters, but did you ever think of somebody else in the characters that you might have liked to have seen, like, I don't know, Michael Caine and...
Oh, another actor?
Yes.
Yeah, I wrote this for Wilford Brimley. I don't know, anybody know who Wilford?
Oh yeah, sure.
That's who was on my mind, Wilford Brimley.
And who was the female character?
I don't want to say. It was not. No, I'll say. It was Kathy Bates.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I must say, in retrospect, Kathy, if you see this, please understand I love you. But it was just, I was thinking of two obvious people, and I'm glad that it ended up not being that.
Yeah.
I think I couldn't have been happier with who ended up.
Yeah, really excellent.
It's really a remarkable film because it doesn't fall into kind of any one genre, and it started out something else and completely changed over the course of the film. And when I saw Blythe Danner's comment, "Oh well," and then turn on the light, and then there was this whole hoarding thing, I thought that juxtaposition between the two characters from totally different opposite points of view were such an interesting thing. I thought the energy level just elevated itself right then and there, and thinking, how is this going to work out? Now, did you think of the atomic bomb at the very beginning of thinking about writing
Well,
this?
he'd asked me that earlier. No, I didn't. It was a friend made a joke, and I thought it was a brilliant joke. So I added it to the film. I went back, rewrote it, and that's it.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Other questions or no? There's a moment where Ed, late in the movie, types on his prepper message board something. He says, "The way I see it, some people need to be who they are, even if they don't want to be who they are." Mm-hmm. And that seems like pretty much a central theme in a way for the story about his transformation.
Yeah,
Like he doesn't want to change, but he is changing.
Yeah, well, see, that's the opposite of that. And I think what that was, what I wanted that to be there was that he was accepting Blythe for who she was. And he was convinced that she didn't, well, when he goes and confronts her in the store, and she says, "I'm happy the way I am," and he goes, "No, you're not." So and then she gets really mad, and you do not tell a woman, you know what I'm saying? And she's like, "You get out of here." And, But that's why he wrote that. He was saying, that was his way of accepting her and saying, "Look, she's not happy where she is, but I'm not going to change her, and I'm accepting, and that was an important point in the movie. And the truth is, that was an important point for me learning the form, because up to that point, I wasn't really writing, and that's why it happens where it does in the film. I wasn't really writing a rom-com, which in any rom-com, they have to break up at some point. Yeah. And it's fairly late in the movie. And it suddenly dawned on me, oh, I'm writing a rom-com. Because I'm writing a thriller. This is awesome. And they're like, no, you're not. And it wasn't until that moment that I understood, and it had to be a matter of him accepting that she's not going to change, and therefore she's gone. And the job is to make sure it's over. In the audience's eyes, it's over. She's not coming back, because ultimately she is coming back. Yeah. And that's really the job, is to make sure those things, that it has to look, movies, and this is important in screenwriting, it has to look like your character is going to fail. It has to look like that. He's not going to fail. Yeah, you have to make it look as much as you can like, oh my God, is this going to be one of those movies where there's a downer ending? I can't believe it. But you have to try and sell that.
That all is lost moment.
Yeah, it's the all is lost moment, and you got to do it. And especially non-filmmakers have read Sid Field's book, so everyone, it's the all is lost moment. So,
do we have another question back there?
Yes.
Okay.
So I was just wondering, as the director and DP, what are some of the challenges that you face with being both of those on set?
Wearing both hats, DP and director, with some of the challenges.
Well, I've done it pretty much most of my career. And again, Ridley Scott, and that was part of my interest, was Ridley Scott doing it. He does it all. He did it until he started shooting with 20 cameras, and of course he can't be in all of them. But in this case, and it was difficult. I have to be honest, it was very, very difficult. But there's an advantage, too, because you're not arguing with your DP. At least, I would, but it'd be a very different process, and people wouldn't understand it, and usually took place late at night when I was trying to sleep. But it has its advantages. You're able to move, and so any disadvantage. But the frustrating thing, and there have been times in my career where I just wanted to not be a director, believe it or not. I just like shooting and wanted to get it right for once, because you have to compromise. You have to go in and go, yeah, this is nice, but you have to realize, and there's actually a very famous book on cinematography by John Elton, who shot a lot of noir movies, The Big Combo, which is on YouTube, by the way. You should see that. Fantastic old noir films with slashes of light and just great stuff. And he wrote a book. He's probably one of the only DPs that ever wrote a book on, right? And at the time, it's from the 40s, and at the time, people were very angry they wrote this book. But strangely enough, there's a moment in the book where he says a lot of DPs became directors, but they needed to let go of being a DP. And many of them failed because they did not know how to do that. They did not know how to just go, it's not my job anymore, focus over here. And so it was very important for me to learn how to do that. So I was saying there's a lot of things that I would have done differently on this, but I had to go because the director was screaming at me. So.
Would you do it again?
I don't know. That's the question right now. I don't know.
You don't know whether you do directing and DP?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no. I think, you have any further questions on that or no?
No, that was perfect.
Okay, great. That was the last question. Okay, well, let's give a round of applause here for Noble. Very much thanks for
Thank you, guys.
a very engaging conversation. And reminder, tomorrow, come back for the film festival, 2 programs, and thanks again. Great. Thanks, Noble.